Hello and welcome to a special Wednesday edition of the Brock Prince. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, with new content for you. Usually every single Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, because yesterday was Remembrance Day. We're doing it on Wednesday. So thank you to all that served, whether at home or abroad, in peacetime or conflict. Thank you very much for your service, and lest we forget to those who have fallen in the service of their country. On today's show, we're talking about the budget. $78 billion in the hole this fiscal year, my goodness. Also, the Supreme Court says no mandatory minimums for child predators. To talk about this and so much more, we bring on, a little hint from the beginning, Larry Brock, the Member of Parliament for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations, also the critic for justice. Thanks for coming back on once again.
Thank you, Jamie. Always a pleasure to be back on the Blueprint.
You are the most requested person, the Brockinator. They say, bring on the Brockinator.
Happy to be here.
And we keep bringing you back on.
Thank you.
All right. So, crazy week in Parliament last week. My goodness, what a week. So $78 billion in the hole, says the finance minister. The Liberals are pretty proud of this number. So right now, everything we collect, the government collects on GST, goes to pay interest on our debt. Every single cent. And we're actually spending more on servicing that debt than we are transfers to the provinces for healthcare. Make that make sense.
I can't. It's absolutely shameful. They've doubled up the projection of last year's fall economic update. We thought Justin Trudeau was bad in terms of his spending appetite, but this is just a recipe for disaster. Nowhere did I read any aspect of how they're going to make immediate changes to the lives of Canadians to make it more affordable for them. There is nothing there. Pie in the sky promises that somehow, somewhere down the road, all of these changes that they're making and putting in all these billions of dollars is going to net result some great economic opportunities for Canadians, job opportunities, investment opportunities. Again, it's all speculation. Canadians want relief now. This budget doesn't deliver.
We'll do a deeper dive into the budget next week. I believe we have Philip Lawrence coming on, who's been analyzing the budget. Give us a bit more nuanced conversations in regards to where money will be wasted, which there is so much. $78 billion. It still boggles my mind. $78 billion. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about, I mentioned the firearms because I know you are, dog on a bone when it comes to that issue and protecting those legal licensed firearms owners who are following the law. But the other thing I want to talk to you about is something that kind of bubbled a little about a week or so ago, was a Supreme Court decision saying that mandatory minimums do not apply when it comes to child predators.
And I'm still incensed about that decision.
Yeah, there's a headline there. Unbelievable.
Yes.
Again, third time for today. Make it make sense, Larry Brock.
I guess the only thing that can be made sense, this was a 5-4 split. Setting aside the majority opinion, which I thought was completely illogical, they relied upon an unrealistic, unreasonable hypothetical to make the point that a broad-based mandatory minimum penalty for possession and accessing child pornography could leave vulnerable people, depending on a scenario, subjected to cruel and unusual punishment under Section 12. That was the majority's opinion. And in their hypothetical, they talked about an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, where the 18-year-old somehow acquires an image of a 17-year-old naked female whose boyfriend had sent that picture to the 18-year-old. Now, technically, I suppose that person could be charged with possession of child pornography. It meets the definition in the code. And that was the hypothetical that the majority of this highest court said it would be inappropriate for that individual to receive a 1-year mandatory minimum penalty in jail. That may or may not be correct, but what the court seems to forget is the high degree of discretion that police services have and the discretion that Crown attorneys have before the case even gets to court. So in that crazy, illogical, unreasonable scenario, it would be probably very unlikely that the police would even charge a possession of child pornography. There may be other avenues that they could pursue under the criminal code. But it also, even if they did proceed, the police, and it got to the hands of a Crown attorney, such as my former self, I would not take a look at the most serious aspect of how to proceed under the criminal code and say, I'm going to proceed by indictment because I think that 18-year-old should deserve 1 year in jail. We've got tools to minimize the impact that penalties have in the code, completely forgotten by the Supreme Court of Canada. The minority offered a beautiful dissenting opinion that talked about and criticized the unrealistic and unreasonable hypothetical that the majority of the court did. Again, also reiterating that mandatory minimum penalties do not automatically violate Section 12 of the Charter. And I know this Liberal government loves talking about the dangerousness of mandatory minimum penalties. They need to be aware of the language coming from that court.
Absolutely. Let's cue up cut one, where our leader, Pierre Poilievre, mentions exactly what you had just talked about. Let's play cut one.
Some of the reasoning from the justices was that they could see a scenario where two 18-year-olds exchange images and then have a mandatory minimum imposed on them. I don't know what you make of that reasoning.
I think the Supreme Court needs to get away from these imaginary scenarios. Mm-hmm. The scenario before them was two men in possession over a long period of time of hundreds of images and videos that were made by torturing innocent children. And with those facts in front of them, their conclusion actually should have been that the sentence should have been much more than the 1 year and 9 months that the two dirtbag offenders received. They should go away for a very long time. Frankly, if I had my way as a father, I would lock them up and throw away the key.
As a father, I agree 100%.
I'm a father. I'm a former Crown prosecutor. I prosecuted child exploitation law for a significant period of time. I have no sympathy for these dirtbags. I call them pedophiles. It's absolutely deplorable. Anyone who has an interest and acquires and builds on a collection of this filth. It is absolutely reprehensible as a society that we do not come down as hard as we can on these pedophiles.
Let's cue up cut two, because this is you in the House, and I think it is pretty eye-opening when you look at the government's response, because they will say, yeah, we agree with what we're saying, which is this is a horrible decision by the Supreme Court, but they never follow it up with any action. It's basically to imply, well, like anything they do that keeps going wrong, what are we going to do about it? Like,
we'll get to it.
Yeah, maybe we'll find someone who's in charge to fix this, right? So play cut two.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, the Supreme Court struck down mandatory jail time for predators convicted of possessing child sexual abuse material. That decision is disgusting. These offenders weren't caught with a few files. They had hundreds of images and videos of children as young as 3 being tortured and abused. Yet instead of standing up for victims, this Liberal government stays silent. Why is this Prime Minister more interested in protecting pedophiles than protecting Canada's children from monsters?
Child abusers should face the toughest penalties under Canadian law.
But right now...
should face the toughest penalties under Canadian law. Why does it take yet another example of a very serious, heinous crime for this government to say, yeah, these individuals deserve the strictest and harshest punishment, and then do nothing about it?
That's the thing.
Right? They have been in power for 10 years. There has been no increase in the penalty when it comes to child exploitation laws in the criminal code. If anything, they are doing their best to limit its impact, to criticize the use of the notwithstanding clause, to be completely silent. The fact that our Prime Minister was more interested in displaying photo ops of his Asian trip from last Friday, when that decision was Friday, October the 31st, when that decision was released, all weekend long, all the following week. And it wasn't until a couple, 3-4 days ago that we actually heard from our justice minister, who actually finally put something out to comment on whether or not he would use the notwithstanding clause. Apart from that, it was crickets.
Yeah.
That is reprehensible when you had our leader, you had myself, you had other colleagues speaking out against this outrageous decision. And it spread like wildfire across the country because we had premiers as well calling this out for what it was, including the justice minister in Sean Fraser's home province of Nova Scotia. So why does it take such a public outlash of disappointment and concern and outrage before this government acknowledges that there is a problem that needs to be addressed? Same thing can be said for bail.
Yep.
We've been arguing about this for 4.5 years.
And told we were crazy.
We were crazy. It was in our minds.
Yeah, everything's fine. It's not the Wild West out there, right?
Exactly. It's crazy, illogical, liberal reasoning.
Yeah, it's almost like, I said it before, like we bring up an issue because we're hearing it from our constituents, and the liberal reaction is, no, it's not happening. You guys are off your rockers, right? It's not happening. Then it gets to the point where it keeps happening and more people are cluing into, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. So the liberal response is, oh, okay, well, maybe it's happening a little, but nothing to be concerned about. And then when it really heats up, like the people being executed in the streets in York region, just north of Toronto, they're like, okay, it's happening, but don't talk about it. Right? This is their usual game plan all the time.
They never want to be proactive. They are completely reactive to fires and crises across this country. That is not how a federal government should be operating.
They should be, moving. I know government, the old joke is, government doesn't move very fast at all. And in many cases, it's actually quite true. But they should be pushing their department to be reacting to what is actually happening on the ground. And that is concern from constituents, whether it be bail
But in this case, Prime Minister Carney never issued mandate letters.
No, that's true too.
To the public safety minister and the justice minister. So they're literally flying by the seat of their pants, reacting to crises that we amplify, that Canadians amplify, that stakeholders amplify across this country. This, a classic example, this outrageous decision from the Supreme Court of Canada calls for decisive leadership from the government, and that means reestablishing, sending out the clearest message of all, that Parliament is supreme.
I was just about to go there.
Absolutely
That's why the
supreme
notwithstanding clause is there.
to every single court in this country, including the Supreme Court of Canada. We don't need activism. We need them to follow the laws that you and I pass.
Because if we have a bunch of unelected judges making these kind of decisions, what do they need Parliament for, right?
Precisely.
This is why Parliament, the law-making body in this country, has to have the final say, because we are then representative of the people and the will of the people.
We are. And the people are outraged at this decision. And the fact that we have our justice minister, the probably the most important portfolio in all of government, completely misconstruing the tests under the Supreme Court of Canada's use of the notwithstanding clause. He actually came out numerous times saying he wasn't prepared to override the charter with the use of the notwithstanding clause. He completely forgets that Section 33 is part of the charter.
It's in there.
He's not overriding anything.
He's using a tool in the tool chest.
Precisely, which he refuses to do.
Yes, because I think based on C5, the piece of legislation that passed a number of years ago that reduced sentences for a whole whack of pretty serious crimes, including urging house arrest at some point, which, the drug dealers getting house arrest for selling drugs in their home, and then they get to, sell more drugs. But I think this goes along the lines which they want, right? They seem to want to go light on criminals, but go heavy on those who follow the law in the terms of law-abiding firearms owners, among many others.
In addition to putting limitations to freedom of expression.
Yes,
Right.
Censorship laws that we have to deal with in this country.
Absolutely. That's the flavor
Yep.
of pretty much of the day. And it's a priority that we've seen in numerous bills. They'll
So they
take every
fund-
opportunity to restrict our constitutional rights.
Oh, absolutely. While funding the media outlets of their choice.
Right.
Right? CBC, what are they up to? 1.2 billion, something like that.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you have the
Yeah.
$400
And
million
then
to the parliamentary
the budget
precinct
gave them another $150 million
because they were so short.
because they want Canada to be part of Eurovision,
Oh, yes,
whatever that
Eurovision,
means.
yeah,
I'm not
whatever
even
that
sure
is.
what that means.
Yeah. I don't think
But
anyone
obviously,
knows.
it's a pet project because Carney's obviously not just a Canadian; he's a European as well.
Well, I'm assuming
right?
there's friends that need to,
Exactly.
get their fill too. But unbelievable.
Yeah.
Pretty much out of time. The guests
We
get
are.
the last word, as you know, because you've been on here this show a million times. The floor is yours.
Let's restore sanity
Please.
in this country. Let's put these dirtbag pedophiles away, as our leader said, for as long as we can. Throw away the key because that's what Canadians want. These are sick individuals that need to rot in jail. And it's also important that we continue to impress and establish as loudly as we can that Parliament is supreme, not the courts.
Larry Brock. I love it when you come on the show.
Thank you much.
The member of
Thank you
Parliament
very much.
for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations, also the Shadow Minister or Critic for Justice.
Thank you.
Always appreciate when the Brockinator comes on the show. Appreciate your time as well on this special Wednesday edition. Don't forget, new content for you next Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Tell your friends too. Get it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.